The notes softened. The mournful wail of the violin shifted down to the soft, tearful voice of a recorder or a flute. Wood and wind, sound and sorrow. Brant played, eyes still so tightly closed he felt he could push away the presence of a world gone mad. He felt a warm breeze on his cheeks, and slowly, very slowly, he opened his eyes again. The sound of marching feet had faded to the soft shuffle of many feet, and the barking Nazi soldier voices were replaced by other whispers, no more comprehensible, but different. The first sight that met his eyes was a trail crossing another trail. He stood alone in the center where the two met. They came from his left, moving in a slow, straggling procession. He saw broken faces, eyes lowered, and steps that were only half the length they aspired to. To one side of the trail, a small girl stood. Her gaze was locked to his, and at her lips a long, tapered flute, hand-carved of soft wood. He tried to look away, to take in the panorama before him, but he could not. She held him with the depth of her eyes and the emotion in her song. He felt his fingers comply, twisting yet again and tracing unfamiliar chords as he accompanied in muted rhythm to her lead. Then Brant was walking. His steps were short, and his breath wheezed in labored gasps through trembling lips. He wanted to voice a negation, but he could not form a word, could not waste the breath. He staggered forward, feeling the weight of years he had never lived and the frustration of a once strong body, a once proud mind, cowed and broken. He clutched a rough scrap of cloth about his shoulders, heavy and warm, but somehow gripping at his heart like a ball and chain. Around him, others limped, staggered, and moved in a steady stream. Those who had failed to continue were carried, dragged, tended, continuing despite their physical limitations. Brant shook in the grip of a fever, deep and dark, festering in his body and rotting his soul. He shivered, and walked, and shivered again, each step seemingly the last he was capable of, and all that time the flute-like tones of the girl's song winding about him, coiling tighter and tighter. He watched bodies half dead, long, dark hair trailing behind the wooden sleds, drawn on by hand, mule, and the occasional horse, skin red with fever and lesions, lips parted and tongues lolling, eyes wild and bright, and all the while, the slow, constant movement toward... what? He glanced down at the blanket, saw the crudely stamped letters, U.S. Army, and dark, mirthless laughter bubbled up from deep within his soul. The blanket weighed more heavily on his shoulders, and he felt the lingering evil that permeated the coarse material, even as he drew it more tightly about him. No way he could know, and yet he did know. The darkness of the smallpox lingered on each thread, weighed on his heart and mind, and suddenly he realized his fingers. He played the sickness, the nausea, and the darkness as eyes puffed and heart slowed, as the act of putting one foot before the next became the act of placing finger after finger on vibrating strings, and the soft voice of the flute pounded through his head, feverish and full of the pain of betrayal and emptiness. He saw the girl now. She did not stand beside the trail playing her flute, but trudged in the center of a pack of others, thin, emaciated to the point of either starvation or illness that rotted from the inside out. Her steps were not proud. They were defeated and monotonous, drawing her onward slowly and pointlessly. The voice of false promise permeated the air, the hitch in a trusting heart as sharp betrayal bit deep. Brant played, and he followed the trail of tears and notes from the girl's heart, to the soft, dusty ground, to the bodies and the pain, and back to his hands, always to his hands, drawing the music from the strings. His world shifted, and he clamped his eyes closed once more. Somewhere, His own pain was lost in that flow. His world and his life petty beyond comprehension in the face of it. Dying. All but a few dying. And only the music to hold that pain. Her music, his music. Deep, dark river of anguish rolling on like the tide. He clamped his eyes tighter and tighter still, and the music tilted one more time on an axis of surreality. He stood this time, guitar strapped over his shoulder, swinging against him in tight, pendulous motions as he drew the notes from the strings. It was the harmonica, sharp and bitter, driving through his rhythm and forcing his feet to move, one slow step at a time. Brant opened his eyes. The crossroads was no different from 1,000 others. The trees were painted in the multi-hued colors of autumn, and the wind whipped leaves about his ankles and sent them skittering across the road. In the very center, head down, the old black man, Wally, stood and played. His eyes were closed. His wrists quivered as he drew emotion in tangible threads from the small silver metal harp. Brant moved forward, playing the rhythm as he had never played it, feeling the bite in the voice of his instrument and bending it to support the solo. He wanted to close his own eyes and just stand and play. He wanted to let that pain flow out and through and away to some other place, to find his way back to safe notes and melodies with a trace of hope, but he could not. His hands were numb from the effort, and his caffeine-fortified, life-ravaged system barely kept him upright, but he played. He was played. The music would not release him, and then the harp was silent and he played alone. The old man vanished, glancing up and then sweeping away in the breeze, sifting to a wash of color that swirled among the dancing leaves and echoing deep pain in a last lamenting flurry of notes as he slipped away.
Don't stop yet, boy. You stop, you on your own.
That voice, so close, so sudden, nearly ended it. Brant felt his fingers tighten, felt the sudden weariness tear at him, but somehow he played. He clamped his eyes shut and concentrated.
Blues can get mighty deep, boy. Mighty deep. So deep you have to swim in 'em just to keep your head above it all and think. Learned it a long time ago. 'Fore you was born I learned and I played. Can't never stop. That pain, their pain, it's yours now. It'll trickle into you slow like. Fill you from shoe to shaving cream before you can stop it, and you just gotta play, gotta empty it back into the world where it belongs, or it'll eat you inside to out, heart first, until there ain't nothing left but a shell. Till you wish you could go back to a happier time and share a drink with your damn drunken mom, or shoot pool with that prick you call a papa. You don't want to be a shell. I reckon you'll play. Just remember, whatever you do remember, and don't let it get too deep. Don't fool yourself, boy. You can't keep it inside. Can't hold it all. You let it out. Crossroads or crosshairs, all the same. No way out of the pain, except through the music, boy.